The AGL Power Company has said it will shut the giant Liddell coal-fired power station in New South Wales, which is our third biggest, in 5 years' time. It's too old and, to be honest, it can't make much money when governments are subsidising wind and solar power instead. But Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has said we can't afford to lose all that electricity, and he's right. And last week he claimed he'd forced AGL's boss, Andrew Vesey, in a face-to-face confrontation to think again to come up with a different plan within 90 days.
What he has agreed to do is to take our proposal to his board that either AGL should continue to run the station for longer or they should sell it to somebody else who would. And he's agreed to do that.
So it was an act of war, really, today by AGL, just 1 week later, to invite journalists to tour the Liddell plant to show how clapped out it really was.
The lifts are faulty today. Little things like this are an annoyance.
And the woman who runs that plant for AGL just wrote it off.
The reality, the practicality is that the plant should not go on beyond 2022, and that in terms of trying to do that would require a significant amount of investment that would be spent elsewhere on better forms of generation.
Joining me is Sharri Markson, National Political Editor for the Daily Telegraph, and Georgina Downer, former diplomat and lawyer and now adjunct fellow with the Institute of Public Affairs. Sharri, thanks for joining us. So listen, why has AGL gone and done this and embarrassed the Turnbull government so comprehensively?
Well, they've been getting a lot of bad press. AGL has been under fire from my newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, along with many others for the past few weeks, looking at just how much money, the profits that the company is making while it's pushing up household electricity bills and just refusing to even consider keeping its coal-fired plant, the Liddell in the Hunter Valley, open. So it took its time. It hasn't had the best media strategy, but finally today, it had about all the nation's media, all the television stations, all the newspapers, all the journos were there. And we heard a new argument from them about why they couldn't keep open the coal station. This was a new one. They said they were struggling to source coal, struggling to source it. And they also showed the journalists, how worn down and broken down the plant was. They said one generator hasn't been working for the past fortnight, that it's very rusty, and it would take an extra $900 million over the next decade just in maintenance costs.
So this is what I don't understand, Georgina. So the Prime Minister 1 week ago said a big, great breakthrough. We've persuaded them to think again about keeping it going or selling it. And now, just a week later, we're told, oh, it's an absolute complete rust bucket. You've got to be kidding. Well, what's the strategy here?
Who would know? I mean, AGL's got an ideological opposition to this asset, quite clearly.
No businessman has got an ideological opposition to anything if you wave enough dollars in front of their nozzle.
And exactly. Of course, there is that. There is absolutely the lure of making that asset an sort of an uneconomic proposition, and then seeing the energy prices go up and up and up, and AGL reaps the rewards. Well, a nice outcome for AGL, but the trouble is we'll be left with no lights on.
Well, so Sharri, what's the government's plan B? They gave AGL 90 days to tell them what they're going to do with this plant. They've got their answer in 7, I think it is. Exactly.
The more that we hear from AGL, the more that commitment that Josh Frydenberg and Malcolm Turnbull, came out of the meeting with Andy Vesey, saying that he'd agreed to take it to the board, the weaker that's looking like. I mean, yes, he agreed to take it to the board, and of course he will. He has to. He probably would have anyway, but really the commitment that came out of that meeting, or not a commitment, even an outcome, was that Andy Vesey is going to come up with another plan. He's going to look at whether he can supply the equivalent amount of power in another way. Now, the Liddell power station produces about 2,000 megawatts of power. 2,000, that's its capability. It's the third largest generator in New South Wales, but it's not at its full operating capacity. It's only about half its operating capacity. So I expect that VC will come back to Malcolm and Josh with some other plan. Perhaps it will be gas, and that was one of the ideas that they put to journalists today. Maybe they could somehow convert that site to gas.
And meanwhile, the government's handing out subsidies hand over fist to solar and wind. The whole thing, honestly, the power situation in this country is nuts. Can I just ask you, former diplomat, as you are, the confrontation in North Korea, that is getting really scary. There doesn't seem to me to be any obvious answer to how to stop North Korea from developing its nuclear weapons program short of war. Here is the United States Secretary of State just this week, Rex Tillerson.
If our diplomatic efforts fail, though, our military option will be the only one left. So all of this is backed up by a very strong and resolute military option.
Now, Georgina, you're just back from China. You're hearing what seems to me absolutely crystal clear. The Chinese have got zero interest in helping force North Korea to give in. What's left?
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely wicked problem. It was extraordinary in China talking to people, and they basically were shrugging their shoulders saying, it's not our problem. I mean, that's certainly not the government's official line, but that's what the people on the street are saying, and apparently that is very much the view of the Chinese establishment as well. It's not our problem. They've, begrudgingly gone along with the Security Council resolution to impose more draconian sanctions, but you then see the exporters getting in through the back door through Russia. So, this is Russia and China on the border of North Korea not taking this problem seriously at all.
Oh, they're taking it seriously enough because I think they feel it's an opportunity to weaken Donald Trump and the United States.
Indeed.
So I don't know what they're going to do now. Talking about people who don't know what to do, Shari Woolworths today, this is just an extraordinary story. This is ludicrous. It had to fight off a threatened consumer boycott because Roger Corbett, who was its chief executive 11 years ago, goes on the ABC, went on last night, and explained, among other things, why he was against same-sex marriage. Now, he actually confessed on air that he knew he was treading on landmines. Have a listen.
Are you scared about it? About putting yourself out?
I am a little, yes.
Well, he sure was right to be scared because he said all the usual things about marriage being between a man and a woman, all quite reasonable if you're on that side of the argument. And then try to explain, this is where he got unstuck, try to explain why this was not an issue of equality but of definitions. Have a look, because this is what ended up with him being slammed as racist.
It's a statement that is between man and women. A man and a man and a woman can have a similar relationship, but it's different. A black man and a white man are equal, but they're clearly different. A black man will never be a white man, and vice versa.
Shari, interpretation.
Well, look, Roger Corbett was also the head of Fairfax, and you'd think after running a media company for so many years, he would know better than to go on the ABC and talk about same-sex marriage. What was he thinking? There could have been no win-win, outcome for him at all. He was only going to get himself into a muddle. Even politicians who do this for a living find it very tricky to talk about this issue. Look, I don't even understand what he was trying to say myself when he spoke about race, and he should have stayed away from race. But you mentioned that there's a massive boycott of Woolworths. It's just ridiculous, and it shows how people these days can get so whipped up into a frenzy of anger, driven by posts and stories being shared on Facebook and social media, but probably mainly Facebook, that they then decide to boycott Woolworths, which is absolutely ridiculous for this reason in any case.
Well, I have to say, in his defence, I give him 0 out of 10 for communication and 0 out of 10 for analogies because it was fraught. But what he was trying to say, and he was a Christian standing up for his beliefs, give him a tick, was that it's a question of definition. Marriage. It's not about equality. So a black man and a white man, they're both equal. But this is where I don't want to go because people misinterpret it willfully. He said, white man is still a white man.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have a problem with his interview. I probably gave him a few more points than 0. But I would just reflect on the fact that this type of reaction to interviews like that is sort of huge, you know, overreaction.
Gotcha stuff.
But by the way, that is killing the Yes campaign. I mean, the Yes campaigners need to be incredibly careful. I was just talking to some people, you know, in their 60s, sort of my parents' vintage, about what they're thinking. And some of them were inclined to the Yes side, but because of the way the Yes campaign has been behaving, they are really turned off by that intolerance of the so-called tolerant.
I think that's right, Shari. There's a poll out today suggesting that the Yes campaign, they still win it handsomely. I've always thought that. But they're losing a lot of votes.
Yeah, look, this is one of those issues that if you asked the average person, and this is reflected in the polls, they'd say, sure, fair enough, get married, no problems. But no one wants this topic thrown in their face every single day. I mean, at its core, it's about someone's sexuality. And it's not the main thing that they want to be hearing about the whole time, yet it's dominating most of our media outlets. Every single day, it's on the front pages, it's what we read about the whole time, and fair enough, it's very newsy, there's a debate going, you know, there's a postal plebiscite underway at the moment, it should be in the news. But people just don't want it rammed down their throat by campaigners as well. I think
you're right. It's the bullying that is getting them badly unstuck. Georgina Down and Shari Markson, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.